Welcome to this mini podcast series entitled Glimpses of a Possible Future, brought to you by Makespace Oxford. As part of our 5th anniversary celebrations, we connected with a handful of local projects that inspire us. Great examples of people-powered placemaking. We hope you enjoy the conversations. Now here's Glimpses of a Possible Future.
Great, so we're back in the bubble for the 4th talk of the day as part of Makespace Oxford's 5th birthday celebrations, and I'm really delighted that we're now joined by Rob Sykes, who's a local resident and one of the core members behind the 1998 LMS Occupation protest. So they have a little more experience than us. They've just celebrated their 25th anniversary, and to mark that occasion, they were convening in one of Makespace's other buildings just last week, the Community Works, opposite the railway station, and celebrating their 25th anniversary. So Rob, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited about this conversation. And so just wanted to kick off by inviting you to talk a little bit about the project, how it came about, and in particular your sort of personal relationship to it and how you came to be involved.
Sure. I guess the profile of the sort of activist scene in Oxford in the late 1990s was probably rather different to what it is now. I mean, we just come out of a period of sort of very intense sort of national headline-making road protests that, you know, still going on at that time, but coming towards the tail end of that whole decade. Obviously, most notably the Newbury bypass, which where the evictions went on for several months and, you know, made national news on a day-to-day basis, and succeeded ultimately not in stopping that, but in stopping a whole national road building campaign. So off the back of that, various people in Oxford who had been involved, most of whom had been involved in that, were looking around for something else to do with that sort of energy. And I guess in the course of 1996, we revived a local Oxford Earth First group, which there'd been one kind of earlier in the 1990s, notably campaigning against timber yard up in Cumnor, who, you know, were importing endangered tropical hardwoods kind of thing. But that had all fizzled out. On the back of the Newbury energy, we revived that, and we're kind of doing mostly sort of participating in national campaigns, actions against genetically modified food, doing local actions often, but you know, focused on national campaigns. Reclaim the Streets parties. We occasionally hire a coach or get in a coach that someone else had hired and go off to an office occupation. I remember visiting the offices of Monsanto in, I think it was High Wycombe once, which was a fun day out. But as I say, they largely focused on national issues. When we became aware of this dastardly plan that was afoot to remove this historic building, the old LMS railway station, from the centre of Oxford, that kind of gave us a bit more of a local focus, as in, you know, feeling that we needed to do something about that.
So tell us a bit about what was going on at the time, and what the building that was there, and what the plan was to remove it.
It was a shabby looking thing because it had been badly neglected for a long time, but it had been, and it still was, an important historic building because it was built using the same cast iron components that they'd used for the Crystal Palace for the Great Exhibition in 1851, and it was the last surviving example of that. So it was, you know, a very important building. Hadn't been used as a station for decades. Was being used as a tire and car hire depot, and, you know, it got very sort of grubby. But then the news emerged that the county council and city council and university, working in concert, wanted to get rid of the building, ostensibly so that they could build this new 6-lane junction to improve the traffic. Which it obviously wouldn't, because it still had to funnel under the railway bridge. But also, this traffic plan was kind of a Trojan horse for the university's desire to build a new business school, with a £20 million donation from the noted arms deal fixer Wafic Said, who was dangling this money in front of them and apparently starting to get a bit impatient because they hadn't found a site. So it was kind of as I say, an unholy alliance between these forces to basically, you know, take what was part of the city's heritage, one of the very few non-university buildings in Oxford that was listed Grade 2 star for its architectural historical importance.
And that's a really significant listing. There's only, it's sort of top 5% of the listings in the UK or something.
There's a handful of churches in Oxford that have that status, and maybe another 4 or 5 non-university buildings that have that status. And yeah, they basically, we're having this space, taking it, out of the public domain. So all of those reasons, that the loss of the architectural history, the enclosure, if you will, of what could have been a useful public space, the loss of all the trees around the building, that this stupid road scheme was going to cost a huge amount of money and obviously wasn't going to work, and then as the icing on the cake, the thought that the university were going to use it all to build a business school with donation from a rather dubious arms fixer. And we had a few protests outside the building on the pavement, starting to gather signatures on a petition and just raise awareness about it. And there was other people campaigning on the issue in the background. The Pedestrians Association, for example, and Oxford Green Party were campaigning about it. But as it became increasingly obvious that it was going to go ahead, we had a few long chats about it, late into the night in a squat on the Cowley Road, and decided that the obvious way forward was to take control of the building, to kind of force the issue, raise the public profile, raise discussion, and hopefully win enough friends that a campaign could actually turn it around. And maybe the scheme hadn't got full planning permission at that stage, so we were vaguely optimistic we might be able to do something on that score. And there'd been a precedent not that long before. In 1994, a bunch of people had occupied the UPP cinema, which had closed down not long before that, and was its future was looking uncertain. And they took it over and opened it up for a month as the Section 6 cinema, referring to the notice that as a squatter you have to put on the door of the building to stop people coming in, and used it as a community space, showing films for adults and kids. And other kind of events for a whole month until they got an eviction notice and decided to leave peacefully. So that's kind of stood as an inspiring example in the background.
It's a really good example as well, because that's now retained. It's still a thriving cinema.
Absolutely,
it's community owned. Yeah. It's had a bit of a.
One of the things they succeeded in doing. Sorry.
No, just a phoenix moment, hasn't it? It's kind of
One of the things they succeeded in doing was getting a pledge from the owner who'd bought it. It was a hospital trust, and what they were going to do with the land. A pledge to ensure that it was brought back into community use, which obviously it was. It was sold to a buyer who wanted to run it as a cinema soon after that, and after a renovation, it reopened and has been open ever since under various different managements. Yeah, so we had that kind of feeling in mind that an occupation was perhaps the way to go to put our case the most forcefully.
And so you took over the site, and it wasn't a brief protest, was it? Often these evictions happen quite quickly, or certainly nowadays, with the criminalisation of squatting, it's anticipated that you get removed from the building within a matter of probably not even weeks. It's sort of days, if not hours. But conditions were slightly more favourable back then. And so tell us a bit about what the life was like actually living on the site and what you did.
We were there for 4 months. The place was filthy inside, so we spent a lot of time early on just trying to make it more livable, cleaning it up, and sort of there were lots of little rooms and spaces at the side, so we were designated sleeping areas. There was a guy who turned up, a native of Birkenhead, yes, who turned up. He told me afterwards that he'd sensed an opportunity to sell some weed, but he ended up staying for the duration of the campaign and had a lot of practical skills, like plumbing and electrics and so on. So he and other people got the loos and the basins which hadn't been working sorted out, built from scratch a kitchen with sink and gas burners and 2 big gas burners and microwave and prep tables and storage area, all in the space of a week or so. And yeah, before too long, we were sort of up and running as a hub for as the nerve centre of the campaign, but also increasingly a hub for other community events. we became aware that we had this big space at our disposal, and that there were all kinds of things we could do with it, which we did. Some of which, had a purpose of, either raising awareness of the campaign or possibly raising funds for the campaign through donations. But they also were very much involved in getting the community involved. So we held open days quite regularly when people could come and look around the building, hear what we were doing, hear about the building itself, and in some cases we had a visitors book in which people would leave their reminiscences, or would just tell us their reminiscences of like people coming there saying, I remember seeing my father off to the Second World War from here. Or there was someone who said that his mother used to work in the coal office at the side of the station, and he remembered playing on the forecourt all the way through.
So it was like a site for bringing all these historic stories.
Exactly, and that was a really positive aspect of it. And we also did kind of, skill sharing workshops there, tree climbing workshops, because we had there was a whole row of trees in front of the building which we had connected to the building and to each other with rope walkways for the purpose of the anticipated eviction at some point down the line, and built tree houses in several of them. So we were giving people climbing and abseiling workshops, and we were also having an ongoing discussion about what could be done with the building in the long term if we did succeed in keeping it there. There were any number of ideas using it because of its situation just down the hill from the existing railway station and not very far from the bus station, that it would have been an ideal location for a tourist information centre. And it was big enough, in fact, that you could have had multiple purposes. You could have had tourist information, you could have had a bike hire and bike repair place, a cafe. People wanted to use it as a performance venue, which we had a number of gigs and ranging from the acoustic to the quite loud and leery there while we were there. But there were all these multiple brilliant ideas that, if only someone had them a few years earlier, that might actually have happened. Before the university had got their eyes on it, we might now have a beautifully restored, elegant Victorian industrial structure doing all of those things. But
and you were, of course, sadly evicted, and the way in which the eviction happened was quite extraordinary. We haven't got time to go into it just now, sadly, but I know that you have got the exhibition up over the coming weeks that goes into it in some detail, as well as examples of some of the climbing harnesses that you used to stay in the trees whilst the threat of eviction loomed, and the bravest amongst you were sort of hanging on from the treetops, quite literally. But I wonder if, before we kind of disband, wondered if you could sort of draw in on, of course, the project's not still running today, but there are so many lessons that we can take from that. And squatting was very much more commonplace then than it is now. There was a lot less hostility, it wasn't criminalised. Looking ahead to the future, where we still have a very unequal distribution of land ownership, we have the endless sort of enclosure and expansion of kind of corporate control of space. What would you offer up from the protest and the project as, to offer glimpses of a possible future? What could we take from the protest 25 years ago that we know we're going to need at some point going forward?
I suppose the most important lessons for the future really come down to what we found we had to do to make the space while we had it work as a community. So I've talked about involving the community beyond the doors, but actually the community within the doors was another issue entirely, because we'd set out with a clear policy to have an open door and let anyone come in and participate who wanted to. We did end up fielding some people who were there basically to take what they could get, sometimes literally, and maybe not give anything very much back. We did have a bit of a problem at one stage with a group of intravenous drug users who'd set up in the place, and also to a less extent with a bunch of street drinkers who'd found somewhere pleasant to kip. But what was interesting actually was that some of those people did, although they were kind of from groups that you might look askance at, did actually make a serious attempt when they were feeling relatively together to contribute. Not all of them by any means, and we did have a bit of a battle with the Class A drug users certainly, but some of these sort of grizzled old street drinkers spent countless hours out on the pavement with a collecting bucket and a petition form for us, and they were quite cheery, contributing members of the community. We did go to considerable lengths to involve people in decision making. We had interminable meetings. We had this big circle of sofas in the middle of the room that people had donated. Interminable meetings where everything had to be decided by consensus. And some of them at the time just made you want to tear out your hair. But also when it worked and people decided on things and then actually did them, particularly in terms of making the space a nicer place to live. It was really inspiring to see that actually working. So I think the main lesson I take from it is a mixture of idealism and realism is the way to go forward in this. You've always got to wear your ideals on your sleeve, and that's when you get people turning up thinking, what's this, just out of curiosity, and you see them gradually transforming from sitting passively observing to taking an active part, seeing for themselves things that need doing and taking initiative to do them. So you've got to wear your idealism on your sleeve to encourage that, but at the same time you do always have to remain alert to the things that can go wrong in terms of your internal dynamics.
Definitely, yeah. It makes me think of a quote from the late architect, great thinker and anarchist Colin Ward, who said every kind of human activity should begin from what is local and immediate, and I feel like that encapsulates what the LMS protests did. And
absolutely, I mean, there was in fewer words, there used to be some graffiti on the bridge down towards Port Meadow off Walton Well Road. The very well-known slogan, think globally, act locally.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a real perfect example of where you're transforming a piece of physical infrastructure, but actually what you're doing is you're building social infrastructure. You're building an opportunity for people to connect, gain some sense of meaning, gain some sense of purpose, and take action, essentially.
Sure. And what's interesting also is that in the aftermath of our occupation, for the next couple of years, I think, there was much more of a sense that local activism began to focus more on local issues. So there were a number of cases in the ensuing couple of years of people taking squatting buildings specifically to be used as accommodation for people who had nowhere else to go.
It certainly offered up inspiration to us and to what's evolved into Make Space. I think we're going to have to leave it there, Rob, but thank you so much for your time. It's been such an interesting conversation. There's a lot more we could have delved into, and there's a lot more in the displays and your exhibition down at the Community Works 20 to 21 Park End Street in the city centre of Oxford. So I would encourage anyone to go and have a look at that, and I think that exhibition will be moving around the city hopefully as well.
It's on most, I'll put a couple of posters up before I leave so people can see, because the opening hours are slightly odd, but it's on basically until the 23rd, I think, or whatever Tuesday week is. But thereafter, we've been invited to incorporate it in a reduced form into an exhibition that's opening at the old fire station through October, being done by Oxford Land Justice.
Yes, Land Justice Oxfordshire. Yeah, so that's fantastic. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you for listening to this mini podcast series entitled Glimpses of a Possible Future. We'd love to hear what you thought, and so do get in touch with us via socials or share it with a friend. And if you'd like to hear more news and events from Makespace Oxford and our wider community, then get in touch via our website and sign up to our newsletter at makespaceoxford.org.